All right, welcome to the Gen XYZ Podcast. I'm Micah with Matt and Gavin.
Yo.
And this is the eve of the new aid package that's going to Congress tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'll see where it is when we actually publish this, but this is obviously a discussion today on just what has happened in Ukraine. And interesting, I remember when it first happened, I was hanging out at your house.
Yeah.
And I said,
the day they were invaded, yeah.
The day they were invaded, I was like, it's, you could see them assembling camps on the border. They were getting ready to march into Ukraine. Right. And it was pretty clear that they were going to start an invasion. Yeah. And I, like most of America, probably the rest of the world, didn't give Ukraine much credit and said, that's going to be over in a week. And you were very clear at saying, no, I think, Ukraine, they have actually got a lot of resources, a lot of training. They're going to defend their homeland, and it's not going to be that easy.
Yeah. And
you couldn't, and that couldn't have been more accurate.
And part of the reason I felt that way is because I was in Ukraine in 2014 when Russia invaded Donbass. Maybe a month after the initial invasion.
And then
so that's a different story, but I was there and I got to meet the Ukrainian people and I got to see their spirit. I knew that they had extreme fighting spirit. And, it was an amazing place, and I can go into that later, but, that was part of the reason why I felt I had a strong resolve that the Ukrainians would be able to fight back.
You believe that is like the fighting spirit of the Ukrainian people.
Yeah.
Which is one of the famous quotes from Tolstoy. That is,
really?
Regardless of the resources, the greatest resource is the fighting spirit of the people, fighting that war, and that cannot be discounted.
Yeah,
and could not be truer in this situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
So you've been watching the conflict pretty consistently. So I think this is interesting because you've been monitoring some great YouTube channels, and how crazy is this that you can watch this serious conflict? This is a hot war in Europe. It's the first, it's been a long time since we've had a hot war on European soil, and there's all this YouTube channels of great resources that have bubbled up to the top that have been very informative, and a lot of open source intelligence and video clips from the front lines is pretty remarkable. So you've been in touch with that. I was going through War College when that happened.
That's
specifically Advanced Operations course.
I remember that. Yeah.
So in Advanced Operations course,
you were invading imaginary countries.
I was.
I remember that.
They were. Well, think of this. They're real countries. We were using fictional names.
Okay.
And but it was eerily similar. We'll just say that.
And it was just funny because I'd walk by Micah's room and I'd hear him talking on the phone. He's like, "Okay, we need to invade Uzbekistan or something, just some crazy name." And I'm like,
Gotland.
Gotland. And I'm like, is that a country? Is that what's he doing in there? And I would look in there and there's
he's got
these big screens with like tanks all over it and stuff, and he's got a headset on. I'm like,
talking
he's
about
playing, like, is he playing a war game?
Get off your games,
but
he
was
go outside.
It was great to see it come, what we were talking about in that we're like kind of fighting brigade division level warfare.
Right.
And there's so much logistics that comes into it, and so much communication, planning, and resourcing that requires to just, if there's a team of 30 trigger pullers on the ground, well, there's an army of thousands of people behind them that is moving stuff into aerial ports of entry, seaports of entry, and moving material to the front line, backhauling. It's just, it gets infinitely complicated. And then you see Russia struggle with that logistics, and how Ukraine took advantage of some key things. But anyways, I believe you have a good timeline, because I think that's important for us to look back, not only when the conflict started, but even just a lot of history with Ukraine and Russia that a lot of people might not be tracking.
Exactly. I wanted to run through this real quick because I think one of the problems when we're looking at conflict in the world today, like whether it's like Israel and Palestine, Ukraine and Russia, is a lot of people, I think the average American doesn't really understand the history there, right? And what's happened. And I think it's real easy to make assumptions, and it's very difficult to understand the current conflict without the context of the history.
Totally.
You know, so I just want to run through this real fast, just for our listeners, real quick. So because this history really, this is a pretty quick timeline. I'm going to run through it real quick, but it really is absolutely fascinating. And there was a few things in here as I was researching this that I didn't know about Ukraine. So 1918, obviously everybody knows that's the end of World War One. That's when Ukraine initially declared their independence. And then immediately there was a civil war in the country. 1921, the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic was established.
Is it USSR?
USSR. Well, this is the Ukrainian Soviet Social Republic, so a little bit different. And that was as a result of the Russian Red Army conquering 2/3 of Ukraine. So they had literally been a country for 3 years and they were invaded by Russia. It was the first time Russia invaded them.
Wow.
All throughout the 1920s, the Soviet government encouraged Ukrainian language and culture within strict political bounds, which that was reversed in the 1930s. 1932, millions of Ukrainians died in a man-made famine during Stalin's collectivization campaign, known in Ukraine as the Holodomor. So that was literally a Holocaust that they experienced in 1932. So you're talking about a country that's 15 years old, it's already been invaded by Russia, and it's already experienced a Holocaust, right?
Yeah.
Pretty crazy. 1939, this is the start of, Hitler's regime and World War II. Western Ukraine is annexed by the Soviet Union under the terms of the Nazi-Soviet Pact. If you think about that, Poland got swept up in that as well. Right. And there's just nothing they could do.
Yeah.
They were sandwiched between two superpowers at the time. More than 5, but they fought back. I mean, the Ukrainian fighting spirit is just, I mean, it's something to be greatly admired. So in 1941, Ukraine suffered terrible wartime devastation as the Nazis occupied the country up until 1944. This is really interesting. More than 5 million Ukrainians died fighting Nazi Germany. Most of Ukraine's, this is also very interesting, most of Ukraine's 1.5 million Jews were killed by the Nazis.
Wow.
So a country that's, we're looking at just, at this point, a country that's 22 years old, that's already experienced 2 Holocausts, that's already experienced 2 invasions, one from the Soviet Union and one from Germany. Incredible. I think it's really important as I'm going through this for us as Americans to really contrast this to our experience as Americans and our history. Yeah. We've had it pretty damn easy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We had World War II where we had 440,000 Americans were killed.
But that was not on our soil.
It wasn't on our soil.
Yeah,
we've never had an invasion.
Yeah.
We've never had a Holocaust.
Yeah, we had we went to war with Canada and Mexico once, way.
Like 200 people got killed.
Yeah, it was nothing. Yeah.
But yeah, it's. I think this is really interesting because as we think about this, a relatively small country in the world, to have suffered this much is really phenomenal. Really phenomenal. So in 1944, Stalin deports 200,000 Crimean Tatars. I think that's how you say it, Tartars. I think that's there's some. I guess it's indigenous population to Siberia and Central Asia following false accusations of collaboration with Nazi Germany. 200,000. Ukrainian citizens. 1954, in a surprise move, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev transferred the Crimean Peninsula to Ukraine. So that was kind of a gift from the USSR to Ukraine.
Khrushchev.
Yeah, really interesting. Armed resistance to Soviet rule ends with the capture of the last commander of the Ukrainian insurgent army. So very interesting that the Ukrainians fought for, and this is something that's pertinent to the current conflict, is they were invaded in the 1920s. They didn't stop fighting the Russians until 1954.
Wow.
Yeah. So that tells you something about the Ukrainian fighting spirit.
For sure.
Right. In 1986, we had Chernobyl go off.
Oh, yeah.
So millions of people were affected. There was cancer. There was all sorts of devastation. I mean, this country's been through, it's insane. Right? It's insane what they've been through, right? 2014, security forces killed at least 77 protesters in Kyiv. The current Ukrainian president fled to Russia, and the opposition there took over. So that was also a sort of internal coup that they had in 2014. And then in March, that was in February, and then in March, Russia invaded Crimea and the Donbass the Donbass region, right? That was in April 2014. In April, pro-Russian armed groups seized parts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions on the Russian border. The government launches military operations in response. So they immediately started fighting the Russians again. 2019 is when President Zelensky took office. And this is when really like the shit really started to hit the fan, because Zelensky was so pro-Russia, or so pro-EU and pro-West, that Russia just could not tolerate that.
Yeah.
And that's when you really started to see, the escalation between the two countries. And that's it right there. That's the timeline. But I wanted to share that with you guys because some of that I didn't know. And when I read that, and actually, I'm sure hearing all that, it's shocking that this country has not been around that long, and they've gone through so much.
Yeah, yet they've been so resilient and so perseverant through all of that, and
right.
Everyone wrote them off because of the, they're outgunned, they're outmanned, and yet they've done a remarkable job defending their homeland. Yeah, and it's so cheers to the Ukraine. They've done a fantastic job of. Defending the homeland, and they've proven everyone wrong to this point.
For sure. Yeah.
And their Russia they've learned some tough lessons, and I think the last numbers I heard is that Russia was pulling in roughly 30,000 recruits per month. Wow. Primarily from their prison systems. Yeah. But that's crazy. That is the Russian way of war. It's human fodder. It's
Russia.
Human waves.
Yeah, they lost. Between their civilian and military casualties, they lost. It was, I believe, it was in World War II. It was upwards of 20 million.
It was just insane amount.
Yeah,
insane. Like just in comparison to other countries too. It's like every country combined. Right. They had.
Yeah. Germany lost 6 million. Yeah. We lost 440,000. I don't know what the Brits lost, but you
just see the Russian way of war, and they eventually figured, but they've developed some, technology like with the glide bombs is causing a lot of problems because they're assaulting infrastructure like power and wastewater treatment, or just your basic, and that's we would all consider human rights violations. They're targeting civilian populace, civilian population centers, and so that's, but that is obviously starting to skew the scale in Russia's advantage. And so with Ukraine not being able to have proper air defenses to shoot down those things, which glide bomb, as I was reading about that earlier, that
can't shoot them down.
Pretty interesting technology, and there's nothing you can jam. It glides, and I forgot how. It's a massive bomb. And what I think is so tragic is that they are, target an area, and then after us, what's the first people on the scenes, like first responders, EMT, and they target that same area 30 minutes later because it's going to hit those aid workers, and they're really I think the Ukraine's biggest advantage is the fact their human capital is so courageous, and they have obviously been able to weather the storm, and so it makes sense that Russia is trying to target those specific workers. So
and I think reading that timeline there, and then combined with my own personal experience being in the Ukraine, I went twice. I went back to Ukraine after the invasion of the Donbass. I was there in 2014, and then I went back a couple years later to Odessa, it was interesting being there. But one of the things that really struck me in Lviv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine, it's on the western side of Ukraine, was how much they admired Americans, how much they admired the West, how much they admired our way of life, and it was extremely endearing because there's not that many places you go in the world where people are really gung-ho about Americans, right? We've gotten a bad rap, in many places in the world. So when you go into a country and you're just embraced with open arms, right?
It's going to be interesting. Yeah.
It was incredible. And we had went there with a buddy and we went out drinking one night, and every bar we went in, we didn't have to buy a single drink. You know, it was like we had already started sending them aid at that point, and you know, people wanted to talk about the war. They wanted to talk about, you know, they were asking me questions about, when are you going to send us weapons? You've sent us all these MREs, and
I'll get right on it.
You know, and I was like, well, you know what, I just have this app, and I can just call Obama up right now.
Talk to Mr. Obama.
And let me just let him know. He probably doesn't know. Let me just give him a call. You know, he's probably just not aware.
Yeah, they need guns here.
You need bullets, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, people would ask me those questions, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why we're not sending you more. You know, and in hindsight, we probably should have been.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's pretty cool. You got to meet the people.
Yeah.
You know, that are there, that are really appreciating the funds that we're getting, because we're all paying these tax dollars.
Yeah.
A lot of money is going out there, but we don't really get any, you know, effect from it. It's cool that you actually met the people that you're helping through your country. Yeah. I think that's kind of something we get a big disconnect from. So that's
exactly. And what I took away from it is these are good people. These are really good people. These are people who love the American way. They love the West. They love the access that our style of capitalism provides. And they want to embrace that. They want to embrace what we call freedom. They want that. And they've chosen our side. They've chosen our team. And so they're looking for us to step up and support them, because we've promised on many occasions that we would. And we have. You know, I think Biden's done a good job of providing a lot of aid and you know, calling it like it is with that conflict.
It's cool to hear. I mean, obviously all folks are different in different areas in Ukraine, but how appreciative they were. It sounds like they were really like looking to be hospitable to you, because it's from country. So it's cool to hear.
Yeah, it was great. It was like I said, it was very endearing, and it makes it, for me, I feel it personally, I feel it emotionally, because I know these people, you know. I have friends that are still there, and I text with them and ask them how things are going, you know. And you know, it's like my one friend I was telling you about, Natalia, I mean, she, you know, I texted her as soon as they invaded, and her brothers were there. She has two brothers, and they were in line to join the army that day, you know. And she said most of her friends that were there were in line, and she said a lot of them were turned away, you know, when the invasion happened 2 years ago, because Ukraine was at that time like in a position to be a lot more selective. They didn't need as many soldiers.
Yeah, they're definitely running into manpower problems now. So I know that's been in the news as far as like they're changing the kind of bylaws on, you know, and that's unfortunate, because a lot of people are, if I'm a soldier in the Ukrainian army, I've been here for 3 years, and you're telling me my obligation is longer. When am I going to get? How do I plan for the future? And the fatigue is real. Yeah, the fatigue, everything they've been through is real. But Gavin, I'm kind of interested in how does the conflict, you know, hit you? I mean, obviously you're just like, you know, watching the news, and how does it hit you, and how do you kind of feel about the future of that conflict?
Yeah, I don't know. The big thing is, I mean, I feel pretty disconnected. You watch it on TV; it's not really a huge reality to you. So I think that disconnect is pretty huge. So I guess that's probably the biggest thing. You know, how do you really know what's going on there and understand really what that's like to be at war? So I think that's probably how I feel about it. And I feel bad for those folks. I feel lucky that I'm in a country where I don't have to deal with that or have to worry of, like you said, war every 10 years.
Now that's interesting. Is I think when the news first hit, and it was kind of such a shock, and America was kind of like really supportive. We were all in it, and obviously we don't want, you know, obviously Putin is kind of being an asshole here, and you know, so we obviously, you know, disagree. We don't want him to be successful, and I think there was a lot of support, but then it's like after. I'm just kind of curious. What do you think, Gavin? I mean, Americans have a little bit of a short attention span. Yeah. In the first part, we're like, yeah, we need to aid and let's go. And now it's like, but Putin's playing the long game. Like they're kind of banking on the fact that the U.S. is going to lose interest, and they're going to be like, why don't we see results faster? And they're going to have that battlefield fatigue. in Ukraine, but then also the Americans are going to have that kind of fatigue of these aid like how many billions of dollars of aid are we going to be on the hook for, and so that's a real thing. So I mean, what do you do? I mean, obviously America's kind of like that's been a big debate.
I got what you're saying there. I don't know if you can add this in, but I think it's called attention cycle. There's a whole study done on it, and exactly how it works. People get interested, they go, so it's just like a curve, and then boom, on to the next issue, and then everyone forgets. So it's a very big thing when trying to deal with conflicts in the United States and all around the world. So it's funny you mentioned that. It's I did a class on that, but I do see that being a pretty big thing, especially with Israel war that coming around. I mean, Ukraine is just. I mean, even you look at this newest bill, Ukraine. Did they get approved money in this news?
Well,
because I know they weren't included.
They weren't even going to take it to a vote. Yeah. And just so everyone understands, up until I think yesterday, no one even read the bill. It was just bullet points that were fed yesterday, I believe. And so, not a lot of people have been able to really dissect like what the package is going to look like. So and there's a lot of pressure. Obviously this Congress specifically has been just struggling at getting anything approved. I mean, that has been nothing has been moving at all in Washington, and so this is obviously a lot of opposition on the right against the speaker to get this deal done.
I haven't looked at. Is it an exceptionally large bill? Package.
I imagine it's a 15-pound package of paper.
Well, I mean, because we've had
there's a stack that big that you're supposed to read and vote on this in 2 hours. Like
right. Well, I mean, what I mean is like large in terms of monetary value. Like because we've provided. I believe,
and I'll look it up and we'll flash it on the screen.
Oh, okay. So
because it's gonna have ATACMS, Patriots, and refilling that arsenal. So that there's obviously those. War is expensive.
And we're involved.
War is expensive.
Not even at war, but
I mean, you look at how expensive Iraq and Afghanistan was, and I'll flash up what the financials are, but you de-scope one, then all of a sudden Ukraine is just as expensive as those other. And war is expensive.
And what I found interesting is like the evolution of war. Like it's kind of like. You ever play like the Call of Duty series? It's like how it kind of changes over time. You have like Modern Warfare where there's like drones and all this that you can call it like drone attacks and stuff.
The early ones are.
Well, it's really interesting. Like what we have now, the type of warfare that we have now is really indistinguishable from the warfare that we had in other modern conflicts like the Gulf War. And I mean, I think the Gulf War was still similar to it was more similar to like Vietnam and like the Falklands War, more those modern conflicts than this is just completely different than anything we've ever seen. The use of drones, like personal drones larger drones, I mean every type of drone you can imagine, plus access to high-speed internet. That's something that's different. We've never had in a war, like you said. We've never had a war where we can watch it like battle by battle in real time. It's crazy. Like we tune in every night. I tune in to multiple YouTube channels and watch the progress of the war. We can get there's channels where you can go. Of course, YouTube is highly censored, so there's other places you can go like Telegram channels and see actual combat footage, and it's harrowing. Americans have never had exposure like we have. So there's so many new things about this. There new technology. New types of warfare, new strategies, and like you said, unfortunately, Russia is learning. They've adapted.
They learn slow, but they are learning tough lessons and incorporating it. Which kind of brings me to the next aspect is what should the U.S. do? They're obviously going to be faced with this bill and this package and kind of with what we were learning in war college, we call it like ends, ways, means, and so you're thinking like the end state. So what are we actually trying to accomplish here? And then the ways, like what resources do we have to pull this off? And then finally, like, are we willing to use those resources, you know, to make this work? So very, very important questions. You know, how do you define victory? Some, you could look at it from on the ground. I'm going to put it in two aspects, kind of like what I believe, you know, we have like a, you know, responsibility in any conflict. You know, is to end human suffering, and then, you know, stand up to assholes like Putin. You know? And then you know, so you could say, like, it's always like, what is the American interest here? So, there's, you know, how important is Ukraine strategically to America? Well, it's way more strategically important to Europe, but Europe, you know, and Ukraine are our partners. And I was just in Mons, Belgium, in Europe, at SHAPE, which is the supreme headquarters of Europe, Allied forces. And it was awesome being able to. It was actually Sweden had just joined. The day before. So they just you know, joined NATO. So that was huge, seeing Swedish officers in the headquarters.
Very cool.
And meeting with them. And what I thought was remarkable, because I've been there a few times. So I was there, you know, maybe 4 years ago, and there was like, the countries were there, but it was very much an American-led effort. So like, we're here to support American, you know, what they want in the European Union, what they want to do. But this was way different. This was, I believe, all the NATO countries really stepping up and saying and actually, well, not necessarily asking what can I do, but they're trying to posture to what can they do in the future, and what areas of responsibility that can they have, you know, within that structure, and they were taking their defense of Europe obviously much more serious. And so I thought that was really encouraging
than you had seen in the past.
Exactly. Now they're all getting like you know, Germany, Norway, and Finland. They're all getting F-35s. They're all upgrading. They're all really taking this very serious.
And you're seeing the president of France, you know, making very strong statements. They need to go into Ukraine. They need to send French troops into Kyiv to protect the northern border with Belarus. So that's good. That's good that you're seeing. You know, it was cool. I've been to the NATO headquarters in Ramstein, Germany, and I was just thinking about this, maybe because of my ADD. I was just thinking of something different, which was the Belgian bar that we had on base. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
That was pretty awesome.
That was pretty cool.
Because you could get Belgian beer like on tap, and it was like the best. It was awesome. It was the Belgian Air Force, and they had a little bar.
Sweet.
It's great. Anyway, that's but I was just saying, I was kind of thinking that.
I'd be thinking of a crazy night I had in Kyrgyzstan with the Belgians, but anyways,
you're like, the Swiss are now in NATO, and I'm like, okay. So I was just thinking, what good food or beer are they bringing? You know, is there like a Swiss cafe? I don't know.
And I think that is the strength of the alliance. All these different cultures coming together, but it's we are obviously stronger together.
Totally.
And that. I know Europe, they're very nervous about what happens even in the next election, and what America is going to do. So I don't want to write off Ukraine if this aid package doesn't go in favor of them. I really think that there's a risk if you do too much. And there's obviously a risk if you do nothing. Risk if you do nothing. There's going to be tremendous human suffering. On the Ukrainian side. And and then you're kind of in a way you're not standing up to Putin. And so I know it's very tough to, you know, continue this. Probably less risk on the doing more. And I think that was if we're leading as you know, we are America, we are going to do this, and we kind of just go alone as opposed to bringing others with us. If we do more, it means our partners are doing less. So it's really it hits me as like we need to find a balance Like I believe that we can't do nothing.
Yeah.
But we also can't overdo it.
Yeah.
Because there's billions of dollars,
Yeah.
and you're thinking like, how is that being spent? Where is it going? Like,
some of that stuff. Yeah.
It's not even just like the finance. If you believe money is real, you'll stress about billions of dollars. But it is. Let's make that investment count.
Yeah.
Let's.
Yeah, I see what you're saying though, because it is a balance here. It's like, from a moral imperative, we absolutely should pour everything that we have at it, into the EU and us from a moral imperative, because we have a country that's asking for our help, that wants to be part of our way of life, wants to be part of our influence in the world, and we should be right there to support them. We have this history that I went over, and these Ukrainians have been, incredible people, incredible soldiers. My heart goes out to them. My heart aches for them, like the young men dying over there, for their country. absolutely incredible men over there, men and women fighting for their country. And so we have a moral imperative, but the moral, unfortunately, that doesn't always drive it isn't always in America's best interest. And so that has to be balanced, right? You have somebody like Trump that might come in who's like America first and might say, hey, there's not an interest in let's let Russia have them, and that might help us, like, in the short term. I think maybe like our economy, or we may see some short-term benefits from that, but I think the long-term benefits from number one, like reducing the power of the Russian army, learning about our adversaries, and also the political power that we would gain from a victory in Ukraine. All these long-term things. These things that would have effects that would extend out for centuries. Mm-hmm. And so, in my opinion, we need to throw everything we have at it, everything, including. I believe it. I think we should have NATO troops in country, and obviously we already do. We have intelligence agencies in the country, but I think we should have a full deployment, even with U.S. troops on the ground.
I think being able to protect the populace with air defense, like we've had a lot of success with with the Patriots. And eventually, Ukrainian pilots are going to be flying the F-16s, and that interoperability, and that's going to make a huge difference. And so, yes, it's a cost burden, and it takes away from other defense spending that we could be doing. But I've always thought, is like, America's filled with a lot of smart people. Sometimes it requires resourcefulness. And it's very muddy and very unclear on the way the future goes. But I think you have to be guided. We have to do the right thing. And the right thing in this situation is to not turn our back on the Ukrainians, not to turn our back on our European partners.
Right.
And say that the greatest risk is that we could just pull all support. And if we do that, it's basically saying, like, you know what? We don't believe that Ukraine can win this conflict, and we're just gonna take hands off.
We're also saying that our word is worthless, right? Because we gave Ukraine our word, essentially, that we would have their back. Mm-hmm. And so if we pull out, man, you got young men over there dying every single day, every hour. You got men and women dying, and we're sitting over here, and as you were saying, people get disconnected because of the attention cycle, right?
Yeah.
This is really sad. It's really sad, because also with that disconnect comes a lack of empathy. We have empathy for anyone who's suffering, whether it's the Palestinians or, Israeli, victims of terrorism, or anyone, Ukrainians, and even like the young Russian men going over there and dying in droves with the meat waves.
Right. Human suffering.
Yeah.
It's like it's talking about ending human suffering, and that's important. You're trying to end that for both sides.
Yeah.
How many young Russian men just go on and to the slaughter, to the slaughterhouse.
The other thing that's really interesting too in this conflict that we're seeing is we're actually seeing a difference in military philosophy and culture being exposed. It's being laid bare, because it really shows the Western way of thinking and the Russian way of thinking, Eastern way of thinking. Because how do we treat our POWs, right? We treat the Russian POWs with respect. We give them medical care, we give them safety, all that. It's completely different on the opposite side. It depends on what unit they get to and what commanders. And I mean, there's been a lot of massacres on the Russian side. There's been a lot of torture. There's been some really brutal acts on the Russian side. And you haven't seen any of that on the Ukrainian side.
Yeah. And that's where I feel what really makes me support, the more aid is like,
yes,
we have to stand up to this.
Yeah.
We cannot just let this, these human rights abuses, these war atrocities,
right.
I would just feel like, yes, it's a lot of money. It's a big package, but I just don't think I could just if I voted against the aid because of internal politics or budget fiscal stuff, I don't think I could stomach it. I'd be like, no, we have the right thing is to do this very specific, very balanced aid package that is going to save as many lives as possible on the Ukrainian side, and ultimately I think lead to a I don't want to say a stalemate, but a position where it's like, okay, like there's no way that Russia is going to be able to get to their end state, which is taking over Ukraine and then eventually posturing to establish the USSR on the time frame that they want.
What's a little bit scary is recently the rate of progress that the Russians have made. They took Avdiivka, and I did not think they would take that city. I was very surprised. And not only did they take Avdiivka, I can't say it now. They progressed, beyond that. Also with Bakhmut, I mean, they've steadily moved past Bakhmut. It's advancing, and even the gains that were made in the Ukrainian offensive last summer in Robotyne in the south. Russia's eaten away at those gains. Ukrainians haven't made any progress south of the Dnieper. They've got a beachhead there, but they have not been able to expand it because of the gliding bombs. And it's incredible the amount of human meat waves that Russia's thrown at the Ukrainians, and they can't sustain this. It's unsustainable.
Well, do you think if we ended up just stopping all aid, do you think they'd be over with?
Yeah, they would be.
Who else is supporting them?
It would be very hard to see a future where Ukraine was successful.
Right.
Do you guys see that? You guys think that's a possibility that we will stop giving them here in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, we'll find out tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
But it's a very real possibility that they will not pass this aid package. But then it'll be, it's like, all right, the U.S. has played their cards, and obviously, again, it comes back to Tolstoy's quote: you cannot underestimate the fighting spirit of an army. I don't want to put them in that disadvantaged position.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Also, we'll see there's a lot of aid coming in from the EU as well. So they might not have enough to pick up the slack.
Yeah.
But it will definitely change the dynamic for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd easily say that Ukraine will lose the war if they don't have this aid package. I mean, it's a real possibility. I mean, the EU would have to step up. And one thing, as you were describing that about, you were saying, we have a moral imperative to do this. I started thinking about history and about World War II, and it's like, how much of an impact would it have made if the U.S. would have gone all in 1939? I mean, we're talking, that was just 3 years after 1936 Olympics, where we had, Hitler actually put the gold medal around Jesse Owens' neck, and and we thought Hitler was a good guy, at that point in 1936.
Certainly did not think he was the insane.
We just thought he was elected official.
It's like how much, and we waited, pretty late into World War II to get involved. It's like, what if the U.S. would have gone all in 1939, 1940, and just gone, just provided so many resources? How many lives could we have saved? Could we have prevented the Holocaust?
Yeah.
Because most of those Jews were killed in 1944, 1945, because that was the final solution. It was towards the end of the conflict.
Yeah. Well, we should do another deep dive on that, because even Chamberlain and Winston Churchill were conflicted about what Europe's response should be, even through Dunkirk, and I think that's we're kind of talking about the risk, the isolation versus going all in.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Do you ever see a country like go all in right away or go straight isolate? You usually see it like reserve and isolation, let the other side play their cards and then respond in kind. With this one, it'll be very interesting to wake up tomorrow morning and see what package they bring forward and what the floor does. So I believe that it will get passed. That they'll.
I hope it does. I really pray that it does. The problem though with things like this is our government, I feel like, is reactive, like rather than like proactive about things. It's great the 8 packages they passed so far, but like I remember last year, you were at my house and we were watching satellite images on CNN. They said, well, there's 100,000 Russian troops on the northern border of Ukraine, and Russia said, no big deal. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. We're just hanging out. We're just doing a little training exercise, and no one seemed to be concerned about it. It wasn't until they actually crossed the border that people said, oh my God, wow, they invaded. Well, guess who would have thought? It's like if we could have been a little more proactive. And think about this too. Russia invaded Donbass and Luhansk region in 2014, right? So they had 7-8 years to prepare for this. And so the army trained, but they don't have proper defenses on the east. I mean, but in 7 or 8 years, they could have built just, they could have done like the Maginot Line on steroids, but they don't have that. Now they're scrambling to do that. So my point is that, I think that in this world in general that we're a bit reactive. We don't think that people are going to do crazy things until after they do them. Yeah. And in my mind, it is not, it's not outlandish to think that Putin would use tactical nukes on the battlefield.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is a very serious concern, because he has done posturing in the nuclear forces, like saber rattling that.
Oh yeah.
We haven't that type of rhetoric. We haven't had that for a long time. So that is very concerning to provoke a response. I will say I want to believe that Putin believes there would be dire consequences if he was going to use that. That would be a red line that is going to be very consequential for him. And
so what do you think would happen if he used nukes in Ukraine?
Most likely the full conventional arsenal of allied powers that would
conventional, no nuclear response.
Not a nuclear response, but a conventional response. Yeah. So which I mean, and do you know how big the U.S. DoD budget is? It's about $280 billion a year. You would think with that type of money that we could crush an asshole that has the economy the size of Italy.
Really?
Nothing against Italy, but
their economy is only the size
of the size of Italy.
Russia's economy? Really? Wow.
Yeah. If you look at like GDP.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
So, but they definitely need to be taken seriously.
Right.
So, but yeah, let's hope and pray that doesn't happen. But obviously, let's be prepared to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I think I read something yesterday that the World War III was the #1 search on Google. So people are very concerned. Very concerned.
And that's how World War II was kind of started. In World War I, it was just you had these, or World War I especially, you had these allies. Germany was allied with Austria. Boom. Someone gets assassinated, they're pissed. They're the two allies go to war. We have all these allies that are at war. I mean, that's just how we get pulled into a war.
That's a really good point. And what you're talking about, I thought a lot about, because you're right. In World War I especially, right? It was a pot that was stewing. Yeah. And then people like, okay, what side are you on? What side am I? I'm over here. I'm over here. And it just kind of stewed. Yeah. And similar in World War II, you saw that, and we're feeling that right now. Yeah. We're feeling like, okay, where are people at?
Yeah. Well, that is a very. I mean, they're like, you look at the heat map of the world and see what is pro U.S. EU and kind of what is Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and then a whole bunch of other countries that are in other countries are in the gray area.
Right.
They have to have this delicate balance where they don't want to, there's benefits they get from kind of both sides.
Yeah, and they need the relationship.
So it's the tighter you try to pull that web apart, the tighter it gets. And the harder it gets to kind of detangle it. So there's a lot of countries that are in that fine that fine balance. But not to freak out the viewers, but I think the conflict is very localized to that area. There are a bunch of other geopolitical factors that that are going to go. I mean, I would probably feel that like Putin feels like he has the upper hand at the moment. He's been very committed. He's doubled down constantly on this conflict to achieve what is strategic ends. But you have to think if the nuclear button he would be instantly targeted. So it's like that would be in the back of my mind, be like, well, overall, I think in conclusion for this podcast that you have to give Ukraine and Zelensky, president of Ukraine, a lot of credit.
Absolutely.
Everyone doubted them. No one gave them any chance to kind of stand up to Russia, which on paper is the third largest army in the world. I think the New York PD is actually number 5. But anyways, I mean they have done an outstanding job, and to their credit, their fighting spirit has kept them in this. They've been able to overcome this. I have no doubt that they will be persevering in the end, and we'll see what our elected officials vote on in the package. But I want to believe that they're going to continue the fight either way. But regardless, the human cost of war is tremendous, and I think we could just say we hope it goes in a better direction, and we get resolution to this, because there's
a lot of war going on.
The human cost is tremendous. So and I think that needs to be our strategic visions is to end that human suffering, and find a quick resolution on that. But that's a whole separate.
That's a separate
thing. Pleasure talking to you guys.
Good talking to you guys.
And we'll look forward to doing part 2 after we get the package and what happens next. So
everyone keep an eye out.
Cheers.
Good one.